357 Magnum snub nose, light versus heavy ammunition, 110 grain versus 158 grain, 357 Magnum. And this is a test I'm doing with Fudd Monton, who's been a long-time supporter of the channel. He's helped me out with some of this ammo. And what we want to do is see, what's the difference between a light 357 Magnum from a 2-inch barrel versus a heavier one. What's the shootability, controllability, all of that. What's the damage going to be like on the target? And that's pretty much going to be our main focus, is to see, how far one penetrates. Do you need a lot of penetration? Is there more energy hitting that block with something lighter, and will that do a better job? So 2-inch barrel here. We have a Remington HTP, both semi-jacketed hollow points. I don't know the ratings of these rounds because there's no velocity ratings anywhere on those boxes, but 158 grain here and a 110 grain. You almost can't tell the difference between the two of them, so I do have every one of these 110 grains marked so that I don't mix them up in this test. So we're going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy we get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic test. We'll just do our best potential, go into the plain clear ballistics to see what those will do. Then after that, we're going to do more of a real world simulation where I'm going to have 4 layers of cotton shirt on the front of the first 3 inches that represents our pectoral muscle. After that, we'll have a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum, and we'll see how those compare more in a real world simulation. And then I'm also going to do another test where we get really up close here and see if the gases from those rounds, and if we'll go into here and see if it really makes any difference at a very close shot, to see what kind of damage that'll do. And then I'm going to shoot up my steel silhouette. I'm going to focus on a little bit closer today, because what I really want to see is, from concealed carry, from the concealed carry aspect, what kind of follow-up shots and control I can get with those rounds. So let's get started with this test. All right, looks like our 110 grain is rated at 1295 feet per second, and our 158 grain is rated at 1235 feet per second. I believe that's through 4-inch barrels. So I have every one of these rounds marked so I don't mix these up. So our 110 grain 357 mag from a 2-inch barrel. Let's see what kind of velocity and accuracy and felt recoil we get. So here's our 110 grain. 1270, 1316, 1314, 1326, and 1319. Case ejection's good. Looks like we're impacting just a little bit to the low and to the left. Huge fireball. I don't know if it picked up on camera, but that was a huge fireball. So, but the recoil wasn't that bad. So here's our 158 grain rated at 1235 feet per second. Let's see what this gives us. 1199. Feels almost like twice the recoil to me. 1139. 1116. 1137. 1159. So yeah, I'm not sure if our energies are similar, but what I can say is that the 158 grain is brutal. The 110 grain is very shootable. It's like night and day. So let's hit our ballistics gel block with these and see what we get. All right, let's hit our ballistics gel block. You might have noticed this glove. A lot of times throughout the years shooting 357 mag, I've noticed that even with my thumb out of the way here on my support hand, a lot of stuff comes up off this forcing cone and comes back, and it burns my thumb. So I just wear a glove for that reason. But first up, we have our 110 grain and then our 158 grain into plain clear ballistics. So here's our 110 grain. Best potential shot here. All right, here's our 158 grain. We'll take a look at that. All right, it's interesting because it almost looks like the damage is exactly the same between the two of those up until about the 5 3/4 inch mark. Sometimes when I put my finger on here, because it's a widescreen camera, it looks like completely different distances than what I'm actually seeing, and that becomes more apparent actually in the rear shot than it does on the front shot here. when we come a little bit closer with our more real world simulation shot. But our 110 grain, we have a lot of damage, but our penetration stopped exactly at about 12 inches. Our bullet came back a little bit. I can see some good expansion in there. With our 158 grain, we have more like 18.5 inches. And, you know, a very mangled up bullet. Looks like it did a very good job. So, yeah, it's hard to say here. But let's what I think about this. But let's put on our fabric and our MDF and see how it compares that way. All right, more of our real world simulation here. We have 4 layers of fabric, 3 inches of clear ballistics, and then a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard and more clear ballistics. So first up, we have our 110 grain again. Let's see what this does. Wow. All right, been using a bracket setup there. It's been working out for a good month. This is the first time I've actually had a little piece fly back at me, the first 3-inch piece. So I don't know. Let's try our 158 grain, see what this does. Let's go take a look. All right, so we have some interesting performance here. Let's show our MDF first, and we can see both expand very big in this first 3 inches, but our 110 is definitely bigger. And what we're seeing here is a very big difference here. Our 110 grain only penetrated to about 9.25 inches. Does have full expansion on all of that, but our 158 grain, that penetrated to a very ideal penetration of about 16.25 inches. There's definitely more damage in that all along the way there. Huge amount of damage. Judging from my real world simulation test here, I'd almost want to say it looks about twice as good or more with that 158 grain. But we're dealing with twice the recoil here. So I don't know. So now I'm going to do a shot right into this clear ballistics here. We're going to do it in real slow motion to kind of see what we can see with this and see if there's a big difference here in this. And then we're going to move along to our shootability test, see what kind of follow-up shots I can get with this. So let's get started with that part of the test. All right, I'm going to do my close-up shot in true slow motion, and I'm going to wear this helmet just because I've done stuff like this in the past. People don't realize that powder that's not burned and other stuff like a piece of fabric, it comes back at a high rate of speed and it hits you. So I don't want to get hit with it. So let's put this on. Here's our 357 Magnum 110 grain. Let's see what this does. Woo. That is loud. Let's try our 158 grain now. All right, 158 grain. Let's see what this does. Let's take a look at that. All right, so what we got here is pretty similar to our other test with the MDF and the fabric. You know, everything looked about the same. You know, we have more fabric here in this first 3 inches, but there's nothing really significantly different going on there. Now, if the muzzle is actually pressed, there might be gases going in there, but still, I was like an inch away, and I don't really see anything that's really incredible compared to, you know, being back a few feet. So with our 110 grain, we have a penetration of about 9.75. And with our 158 grain, we have about 15.75. So a little bit less penetration, I believe, compared to the last shot, but that could just be from more expansion. But there's nothing really significantly different with getting super close on that one. So very interesting to see that though, and to see what we get in slow motion. So now it's time to see what kind of shootability I can get. So I'm going to go 10 yards from the target, see what kind of follow-up shots I can get between the two of these. All right, I'm standing roughly 11 yards from the target, so we're going to see what kind of shootability we can get with these. So I'm going to get a sight picture, get this on target, line up my sights, see how fast I can get follow-up shots. So this is our 110 grain, and I'll try it with the 158 grain. So here's our 110 grain. See what this does. That splatters that target all over the place, just all kinds of impacts. And case ejection was fine. A lot of boom. That is just very loud and flashy. So 158 grain, let's see what this does. Alright, that hits hard. Case ejection's fine, except by the grip it hangs up. But you know, with that you can see that, you know, it comes up and my grip is changed a little bit where I have to bring my thumb back down. That just happens, that's incidental. You really can't do much about that with these small frame revolvers unless you were to like hook your thumb back here. But you know, doing my best to just keep that on target and to fix whatever's going on to get that next shot is kind of what you had to do. I didn't really notice having to do that with the 110 grain, but it seemed like I did with the 158. So all right, I got a few rounds left. Like I always do, I'm going to back it up from some distance, see how they shoot from a little more distance. All right, I happen to have 5 rounds of each weight left, so I'm going to do kind of a Dickin-like drill from 40 yards here. I'm not going to go for time. I'm going to go for accuracy, so I want to see if I can get that 80% on target from this 40 yards with this 2-inch snub. So we have 5 110 grains loads, and then we have 5 of the 158 grains. So let's see how I can do it here from 40 yards. All right, looks like I missed a couple. Have to go for a reload here. Looks like I'm at 70% there, so pretty close, not quite beating that Dickin drill. If I would have had that last one, maybe for percentage, probably not for time, but overall, what I'm seeing there is it did seem like with the 110 grains, you see those impacts are kind of low, and when I started hitting, I was actually raising my sights up to about here on that silhouette because I was processing that when I was shooting at 5 yards at the chronograph, they all seemed like they were kind of impacting low. So I started aiming high and started getting more reliable hits. With the 158 grain, it seemed like they shot pretty much point of aim and impact at that distance there. And, you know, it wasn't hard to hit, but I did miss. But that's just more from trying to pull off a shot too quickly. The actual point of aim and impact was pretty much dead on with that 158 grain. So my overview of this here, looking at whether you should use light versus heavy, it's kind of hard to say here. You know, one thing that we always get with heavy ammo, it doesn't matter the caliber, is you typically retain more consistency. Like if you have a 9mm round, for instance, and it's 100 grain or 115 or 124, you know, depending on the load, a lot of times the real world effectiveness and what you can see in ballistic tests really shifts around quite a bit. As let's say you have a 45 ACP and you have a whole bunch of 45 ACPs and they all are 230 grain and they all kind of expand really well. Those tend to always do a little bit better. They do better in the real world, they do better in ballistic testing. And you see that with like stopping power, actual real world numbers. When you look at stuff like, let's go back to 9mm again. You look at something that's like a plus P plus, that's super fast, and it's gonna be kind of like this 357 mag. Yeah, you get a really high stopping power. Then you bring back the power or the weight, or you change it. Not so much. As we're like a 44 mag, whether it's a 165, a 180, a 200 grain, a 220 grain, 225 grain, 240 grain. They're all like in the 90 percentile of stopping power, being able to stop a threat with one shot. So What I'm saying here is, when you have heavier bullets, you typically have a more consistent thing that's going to happen. You're going to see more consistency throughout what you're going to get with that. But then you also have to pay for that with, you know, a lot more recoil. As for the 110 grain, maybe not as consistent, maybe not as penetrating as well. And if you change a little thing about the design, really changes the penetration. But you can make those follow-up shots really, really quickly. So between the two of these, light versus heavy, it's really hard to say here, because I would feel 100% more confident carrying the 110 grain, because I would know that if I had to fire follow-up shots really quickly, I think I could do better. But the other thing I'm seeing here is, you know, as a person that has rheumatoid arthritis, has some other health issues, you know, shooting at that 10 yards with that 158 grain was actually a lot easier than what I had anticipated. I've probably done that before, but it's been way back before I had rheumatoid arthritis. And what I'm seeing is really my training is what comes into play here. You know, making sure that sight picture is back aligned before I fire again. Not tensing up too much to take that recoil, but when it's too much recoil, to kind of relax just a little bit, let the recoil come up, and then bring back down, and I can make that follow-up shot. So if I had to pick one of these, I would probably say, even though the recoil was brutal, I would pick the 158 grain in this. Now, Fudd Martin happens to have a, I believe he said a 340 PD. Now that's changing things up a little bit here. I can't necessarily say that that would be my recommendation, because the recoil on that would be extremely brutal. But the recoil at the 110 grain and that would probably be about like the recoil in the 158 grain in this. But overall, as far as our internal ballistics go, I'm going to say the 158 grain did a lot better here. So that's what you get today. And again, thank you to Fudd Martin for helping me out with some of this ammo. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.